My name is Rachel, and I've been married to my husband, David, for almost 12 years. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio with our two kids, Ethan and Lily. Life with David has always felt steady and dependable. He's the kind of man who works hard, rarely complains, and comes home every night to have dinner with us. For many years, I thought that was all I would ever need. But sometimes life takes turns you don't expect, and the things you thought were unshakable get tested in ways you never imagined. David has a close circle of friends he's known since high school. They're more like brothers to him than friends. One of them, Mark, had always been around. He was charming in his own way, the kind of man who never seemed to settle down, always bouncing from one relationship to another. When we first got married, I thought Mark was fun to have around because he kept the group lively with his humor and larger-than-life stories. But as the years passed, I noticed that his lack of boundaries sometimes made me uncomfortable. He had a way of looking at people, of lingering just a little too long, that felt unsettling. I never thought much of it because I trusted my husband and believed Mark wouldn't cross any serious line. But everything changed one weekend when David invited him over to help with some work in the backyard. It was a Saturday afternoon. David and Mark had been fixing the fence outside while I prepared some snacks and lemonade in the kitchen. The kids were upstairs playing video games, their laughter echoing through the house. After a while, David came inside, his shirt drenched in sweat, and told me he needed to run to the hardware store for more supplies. He asked me to keep Mark company while he was gone. I smiled and nodded, not thinking much of it. Mark walked in a few minutes later, wiping his forehead. "David always drags me into these projects," he said with a laugh, dropping onto the couch. I chuckled politely and set the tray of lemonade on the coffee table. "You know him. He can't sit still when there's something to fix." Mark leaned back, his eyes following me as I moved around the living room. At first, it was casual, small talk about the neighborhood, the weather, his new job. But as the conversation went on, I noticed his tone shift. He started complimenting me, saying things like, "You don't look like a mom of two," and "David's lucky to have you." I brushed it off with a nervous laugh, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Thanks, Mark. But you should save the charm for someone single." He smiled, but it wasn't his usual joking grin. It was something else, something heavier. "I'm just being honest," he said. "I've always thought you were beautiful." My heart skipped. I didn't know what to say. I shifted in my seat and crossed my arms, hoping the silence would kill the moment. But it didn't. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on mine. "Rachel," he said softly, "you ever think about what life would be like if things were different? If you hadn't married David?" I froze. The air felt thicker, heavier. My instincts told me to end the conversation right there. I stood up and started gathering the glasses from the table, trying to create distance. "I think you should stop," I said firmly, avoiding his gaze. But Mark stood too, stepping closer. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said, his voice low. "It's just, I've seen the way you look sometimes. Like you want more. Like you're not fully happy." His words cut deep because part of me wondered if he was right. Over the years, I had sometimes felt invisible in my marriage, lost in the routine of raising kids and managing a household. But that didn't mean I wanted this, didn't mean I wanted Mark. I shook my head. "You're wrong," I whispered, though my voice trembled. He reached out as if to touch my arm, and instinctively, I stepped back. Just then, the sound of the front door opening made us both jump. David's voice filled the hallway. "I'm back. Got what we need." Relief washed over me, though my hands still shook. Mark quickly sat back down, pretending nothing had happened. When David walked into the room, he looked between us with a puzzled smile. "Everything good?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just talking." The rest of the day went by in a blur. Mark acted like nothing unusual had happened, cracking jokes and helping David finish the fence. I, on the other hand, could barely keep my thoughts straight. I felt guilty for not telling David right away, but I didn't want to create a rift between him and his friend. At the same time, I knew what had happened wasn't just in my imagination. That night, after the kids were asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. David turned to me, his hand brushing mine. "You okay?" "You've been quiet tonight." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to spill everything, but another part feared what it would do to him. Mark was his closest friend. Would David believe me? Or would he think I was misreading things? I decided to stay silent for now. "I'm just tired," I whispered, and he kissed my forehead before falling asleep. The following weeks were complicated. Every time Mark came around, I felt tense. I avoided being alone in a room with him, making excuses to stay busy with the kids or errands. He didn't try anything again, but his eyes lingered, and I knew the tension was still there. One evening, though, the situation escalated. David invited Mark and a few other friends over for a game night. While the men set up in the living room, I went to the kitchen to bring out snacks. When I turned around, Mark was there, blocking the doorway. "You're not going to tell him, are you?" he asked quietly. I glared at him, my pulse racing. "There's nothing to tell if you keep your distance." He smirked. "Relax, Rachel. I'd never ruin my friendship with David, but you can't deny there's something between us." I clenched my jaw. "There isn't. And if you keep this up, I will tell him." His face darkened for a second, but then he forced a laugh and stepped aside. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't carry this burden alone anymore. After the guests left, I sat David down and told him everything: how Mark had spoken to me, the way he'd made me uncomfortable, the moments when he tried to push boundaries. David listened silently, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. When I finished, tears welled up in my eyes. "I didn't want to tell you because I knew he meant so much to you, but I can't keep pretending it didn't happen." David exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Rachel, I believe you. And I'm so sorry you had to go through this. I'll take care of it." The next day, David confronted Mark. I wasn't there, but I heard about it later. Their conversation was heated, voices raised. Mark denied crossing any line at first, but eventually, his silence was enough of an admission. Their friendship ended that day. It hurt David deeply, losing someone he'd considered a brother, but he told me something that reassured me more than anything. "No friendship is worth more than my marriage," he said firmly. From then on, we worked on our relationship more intentionally. We spent more time together, had honest conversations about our needs and feelings, and slowly rebuilt the intimacy that had slipped away over the years. Looking back, I realized that moment of temptation wasn't just about Mark. It was a wake-up call. A reminder that love isn't just about loyalty. It's about communication, trust, and protecting what matters most.